I'm Ben Meiselas from Legal AF, joined by our co-host Karen Friedman Agnifilo. Want to talk about this unusual filing, I guess, in the Southern District of Florida in the case against Donald Trump being prosecuted by Special Counsel Jack Smith. Judge Eileen Cannon is the judge on that case. Donald Trump is charged with willful retention of national defense information, obstruction of justice, and making false statements in connection with basically taking documents that didn't belong to him at Mar-a-Lago. And keeping it at Mar-a-Lago and then lying to investigators about that. Also, co-defendants in that action include Waltine Nauta, Donald Trump's valet, who made false statements and engaged in obstruction of justice, according to the indictment, as well as in the superseding indictment, Donald Trump's maintenance worker at Mar-a-Lago, Carlos de Oliveira. And in the superseding indictment, as well as in a new filing by Special Counsel Jack Smith, it references this employee 4. Employee 4 is Yusel Taveras, who is the IT worker at Mar-a-Lago, who was formerly represented by the same defense lawyer representing Waltine Nauta, one of the defendants in the action. And that lawyer is Stan Woodward, who is paid for by Donald Trump's political action committee, the Save America group that has spent over between $40 and $50 million in the past 6 months alone, paying for lawyers in the various Donald Trump criminal and civil cases. And so what Special Counsel Jack Smith filed in the Southern District of Florida is something called a motion for a Garcia hearing. And that involves a situation where the prosecutors are calling out a defense counsel for having a conflict of interest that could be a potentially unwaivable conflict of interest. For example, in a situation like this, where you have a lawyer, Stan Woodward, representing a defendant like Waltine Nauta, being paid for by Donald Trump's political action committee, while at the same time, Woodward also represented Yusel Taveras, who is a witness who is now providing material testimony against Waltine Nauta, who's represented by Stan Woodward. So the question becomes, and you could imagine this conflict, what happens when Yusel Taveras takes the stand and his former lawyer, Stan Woodward, who's now representing the defendant, Waltine Nauta, is cross-examining his former client, potentially using client confidences and things like that. So it creates a lot of problems and situations. And these Garcia hearings are intended to inform the various parties and witnesses about potential conflicts and the ability to also have independent counsel provide advice and guidance, and to provide a setting where these rights and these conflict issues can be addressed. In a reply brief that we covered here on the MeidasTouch Network, filed by Special Counsel Jack Smith, he talked about the importance of having a Garcia hearing before Judge Cannon and pointed out what went down before a grand jury in Washington, D.C. as it relates to Yusel Taveras, who, when Yusel Taveras was being represented by Stan Woodward, the lawyer again representing Waltine Nauta as well, Taveras lied to the grand jury in March of 2023 and said that he wasn't aware of anything about classified information or documents, had no knowledge about deleting surveillance footage. And then Special Counsel Jack Smith, after bringing the indictment against Nauta and Trump, sent a target letter to Yusel Taveras saying, "We know you were lying." Then Jack Smith asked for a Garcia hearing in Washington, D.C. before Judge Boasberg, who presides over the grand jury in Washington, D.C. A Garcia hearing was held, and Boasberg provided Yusel Taveras with the ability to have a federal public defender represent him. And when Yusel Taveras had this other lawyer, an independent lawyer, represent him, Taveras was like, "Whoa, I get it now. Donald Trump is paying lawyers to help Donald Trump and not pay me and not help me, and throwing me under the bus." Yusel Taveras then said, "I don't want Stan Woodward as a lawyer. brought on the federal public defender and then told Jack Smith the truth, which is that Trump, Nauta, and Carlos de Oliveira conspired to have him destroy surveillance footage. And he admitted to lying before the grand jury back in March of 2023. So Jack Smith, get to Karen right now, I wanted to give you the procedural background, though. Jack Smith explained all of that in a reply brief to Judge Eileen Cannon, and now Stan Woodward, the lawyer representing Nauta, who's the lawyer, and it is clearly implied in Jack Smith's brief that it was because of Woodward's conduct that Yuscil Taveras wasn't telling the truth. Woodward is upset about the situation now and feels that his reputation has been impugned by Jack Smith's reply, and also his client and past client. He claims that Taveras would be upset about this at all. But Stan Woodward's like, I want to file something now, Judge, because that was an offensive brief that Jack Smith filed. And then he says Jack Smith may have violated a grand jury secrecy. Karen, what it was a complicated setup, but I want to get your view on this, but I wanted to set the stage.
Yeah, no, this is a kind of a panicked, brief that was filed. He sees dollar signs going down the drain potentially, because any other normal judge, if Eileen Cannon was predictably judicious the way most federal judges are, this is an absolute conflict, and he would no longer be on this case, right? Because it's Eileen Cannon, we really don't know what will happen, and we can't make what would be normal predictions based on the law. It was a strange reply or surreply brief, because it acknowledged that these are not favored, and typically you don't do that typically, and it's looked unfavorably in the courts to do this, but he's very desperate and says, please, please, please let me do this. Jack Smith is trying to sully my reputation and influence the court and misquote me and influence the court of public opinion. And he says there's no actual conflict yet, and that won't happen unless and until employee number 4, i.e. Yuscil Taveras, actually testifies. But if that were the case, then there's no reason to ever have a Garcia hearing. And that means there would never be any conflict, ahead of time until someone testifies. But that's an absurd, illogical argument, right? You can predict, you can sort of say, who are the witnesses going to be? And if one of the witnesses is somebody that you represented as a lawyer, just because they haven't testified at trial yet, that's an actual conflict. What's going to happen in the middle of the trial if that's when the conflict, because he admitted, right, that basically, there's no conflict unless and until Trump employee number 4 testifies against Nauta. So he admits that there would be a conflict when he does. So play this out at trial. You've got Stan Woodward representing Waltine Nauta. He opens, they go to trial, they cross-examine witnesses, and then Yuscil Taveras gets up there. Then what? What's he supposed to do? Step back and not cross-examine him? I mean, it's sort of a preposterous position to be in. So he'll say, oh, that's okay, I'll have a co-counsel, and he can cross-examine Yuscil Taveras. But that too does not work in this situation, because let's say Yuscil Taveras says something different than what Yuscil Taveras told his attorney, Stan Woodward, in confidence with an attorney-client privilege. And let's say he told him something that was different than what he's saying under oath on the stand. Now, Stan Woodward has a duty to represent Waltine Nauta to the best of his abilities, to give him an effective, defense, to be an effective lawyer. But he also has an attorney-client privilege, and he'll know things from his representation of Taveras. You can't be in that position to have something that you can't use against your, you can't use to help your client. I mean, that would put you in an untenable situation. In addition, there's just no way he could cross-examine him, right? Because you're not going to cross-examine somebody who was your client. You have a duty to them too, and they hold the privilege. The client holds the privilege. So it's an untenable, unworkable position. It is an actual conflict. It's about the clearest conflict there is. It's not somebody you represented even in a different matter, right? It's in this matter, in this case, with these facts, you represented Yuscil Taveras and now Waltine Nauta, whose interests are adverse to one another, and Yuscil Taveras is going to testify against Waltine Nauta. So he's off the case if it was any other place, and he doesn't want to see that happening. He doesn't want to, this is his, he loves this case. He loves being in the orbit of Donald Trump, it seems, because since he represents multiple people in this world, and he doesn't want to lose out on doing this case. But, who knows what Aileen Cannon will do, because she's, hasn't so far done much that's consistent with how, with rules, norms, and laws of, that other people do.
I think Jack Smith recognizes that she's going to make the wrong decision. And that's why I think that he's filed a lot of these briefs that he's done, both in terms of filing, documents relating to SEPA, filing not one. Remember, there's 2 Garcia hearing motions, and we won't talk about the whole other conflict as well. But remember, the other lawyer who's now representing Carlos de Oliveira, the maintenance worker who was charged, is represented by John Irving, who is also paid for by Donald Trump's Political Action Committee. So if you think about it, you've got Trump, who's paying for his own defense, from what we know from the Political Action Committee. You've got Waltine Nauta, whose lawyer, remember Stan Woodward, being paid by the Political Action Committee. You've got the maintenance worker who didn't do what Yuscil Taveras did. So the maintenance worker, Carlos de Oliveira, was charged. He's being represented by John Irving, who's paid for by the Trump Political Action Committee. John Irving is co-counsel with Stan Woodward on the case in Washington, D.C., representing Peter Navarro, who's in Trump's inner circle, in the contempt of Congress case, where Navarro refused to testify about the January 6th insurrection to the January 6th committee and gave them his middle finger on behalf of Donald Trump and refused to show up for a deposition. That case is going to trial soon. So Irving works with Woodward, who are both being paid for by Trump's Political Action Committee, and both of their clients, let's face it, would not be charged if they told the truth and were cooperative, but their clients are now dragged into this and will have severe consequences as a result of what appears to be this, conflicted arrangement that is taking place right now. And so there's another Garcia hearing as it relates to Irving as well, because you've got Carlos de Oliveira, the maintenance worker, who by all accounts just rose through, the ranks of whatever it takes to rise through the ranks in Mar-a-Lago to become the head of maintenance. He's worked there for many years. He's an immigrant, and he's now involved in this thing. And, I think that his family and other people are also recognizing, like, why are you doing this? Like, why you just tell the truth and you'll be like Yuscil Taveras. So I think Jack Smith wants to have that hearing where he'll be able to go to de Oliveira and say, look, do you understand what the conflict is? Do you get the situation? I think Cannon makes the wrong decision. She'll probably not allow, she'll limit it or not allow it. And then I think Jack Smith will go to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeal. And I think they understand these issues. And I think that's what Jack Smith is setting it up for. Final words, Karen?
It's just, let's see what happens, right? With Aileen Cannon, she keeps making all the wrong decisions. So, it's just so disappointing. But I really think that Jack Smith kind of knows that, and that's why he's pushing the Jan 6th case, because this case, there's no way this case is going to go, or if it does, it's not going to be as fair and consistent with the law, because Aileen Cannon just really is a loose cannon.
Well, we will keep everybody posted, of course. Karen Friedman, Agnifilo. We call these duets, the Karen Friedman, Ben Meiselas duets. I like it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining me in here and sharing your incredible wealth of knowledge with all the Meidas Mighty out there. We're lucky to have you, and your experience as the former number 2 at the Manhattan District Attorney. You're approaching this as a prosecutor who has held these types of hearings and who knows the inner workings. And in fact, you've worked with Jack Smith before. And everybody go back and watch all the Karen videos where she talks about that and pretty fairly predicting what was going to happen in the case so far. Everybody go to MeidasTouch.com. All breaking news, everything in the MeidasTouch orbit. We've got some great stories. Editor-in-Chief Ron Filipkowski there's doing an incredible job leading a great team of writers and researchers. MeidasTouch.com. And then wherever you get audio podcasts, subscribe to Legal AF. Thanks so much for watching, and shout out to the Meidas Mighty.
Hey, Meidas Mighty, love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram @MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.